Miami Dolphins cornerback Jack Jones is feeling the love, and a look at two more possible GM candidates for the Miami Dolphins here on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give each and every one of you a thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network, because it is your teams every day. We don't just say it. We live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use code Locked On NFL for $20 off of your first purchase. A couple of things on today's show to roadmap. We're looking at Ian Cunningham and Ray Agnew as possible candidates for the Miami Dolphins general manager vacancy. We're going to be exhaustive. We're going to look at a lot of these candidates, especially the ones on my short list, which is 13 candidates long. And the objective is we want to be as well educated as we can on what is out there in the ethos for the Dolphins to consider. And what they do, we will judge as it happens. But also, drawing a little inspiration from the love that Jack Jones is feeling with the Miami Dolphins. And a look ahead at some expiring contracts that I would be interested in bringing back next year if I were the Miami Dolphins, and that would include cornerback Jack Jones. Now, who's ultimately making these decisions, how much scheme stability there is, I think a lot of that will ultimately decide and define how much room there is to bring players back, but how these players play with one another, and that can help motivate even a new general manager who comes in with a new head coach and a new scheme. But Jack Jones, I mean, he's doing the media tour, and he's on Pat McAfee, and he's on social media, and he's feeling his time here in Miami. He's very complimentary of Mike McDaniel. He thanked Chris Greer on Pat McAfee for bringing him in and giving him a chance, but he's glad they kept Mike. And a couple of weeks ago, he had like that cryptic, like wide receiver style, like go where you're valued. And it was not that long ago that Jalen Ramsey was posting stuff like that, or posting pictures of rotten oranges, and everybody was speculating what it meant. And then Ramsey's gone. So another cornerback with a cryptic social media post. Well, it turns out Jack Jones loves it here, or at least that's what he's posturing out into every time he has a chance to speak publicly. And he's been playing inspired. Now, it hasn't always been super stable. It has been a transition. There are things that I think test him with what the Dolphins need from their corners and want from their corners with how they stylistically play. That might not be a one-for-one fit. But if a guy's happy and a guy's willing to take a one-year deal, another one-year deal for a guy who's developing chemistry with guys who are under contract to be here next year, let's have the conversation, right? Like there's a lot of expiring contracts for Miami for names that you're probably going to want to retain, right? The Dolphins per over the cap have 36 players under contract, another 2 that are voiding contracts, that being Zach Wilson and Matthew Judon. I'd be surprised if either one of those guys is back. So you have 36, right? You need 15 just to get to a top 51. So I enjoyed hearing that from Jack Jones, but the concept here is, who are the guys, including Jack Jones, who are expiring contracts that right now I would have interest for the right price and the right duration of time? Who are the guys I'd be interested in bringing back off of this year's team for another go round the sun, regardless of what the situation is in Miami, regardless of who the coach is, regardless of what the scheme is, whether you're changing DC or OC or head coach or whatever. Because I think it would behoove you to identify some players proactively that you think can be assets for your team, regardless of if it's in Mike McDaniel's system or something else. Here's the names of expiring contracts for the Dolphins. Rasul Douglas. Next year will be his age 32 season. Liam Eichenberg, Daniel Brunskill, Jack Jones, Kader Kohou, Larry Borom, Cole Strange, Willie Gay, Cedric Wilson, Alexander Madison, Darren Waller, Ashton Davis, Benito Jones, Kendall Lamb, Iafitu Malfonwu, Julian Hill, KJ Britt, Jermaine Ifedi, Greg Dulcich, Jake Bailey, Joe Cardona, Artie Burns, D. Eskridge, Riley Patterson, Matthew Butler, AJ Green, newly acquired this week with the Juju Brents to IR transaction, Elijah Campbell, Yadi Kajus, Keon Smith, Cameron Good, Ethan Bonner, Obina Eze. Off of this list, according to Over the Cap, a number of them are restricted free agents, which means the Dolphins can choose to tender these players for a first-round tender at a flat rate, a second-round tender at a flat rate, or a original round tender, which is what they gave Kader Kohou this past year as a restricted free agent. He, of course, not going to get a chance to play on that. But it was an original round tender for Kader Kohou, who was an undrafted free agent. First round tender price is like $7.8 million. Second round tender price would be like 5.6, or then original round tender would be like 3.4. And then if somebody signs into an offer sheet and you don't match it, you get that compensation back from the team that signs it. Restricted free agents for 2026 off of this year's team. Jack Jones, I'm not sure the details on that. I know he had several separations off of his rookie contract, so I don't know what does and doesn't have to do with that or suspension from a team or whatnot. So I'm not sure the exact details on that one off the top of my head. But you also have Julian Hill, who's in the same shoes that Kader Kohou was in the year prior as an undrafted free agent who came in and played 3 years on his original 3-year UDFA contract and has played the whole year or the whole tenure on it. So he'll have a chance to be a restricted free agent tender. The Dolphins can effectively lock him in if they want to. Matthew Butler, who they got in waivers in May, I believe was when they claimed Matthew Butler off waivers. Keon Smith is a restricted free agent. Cameron Good is a restricted free agent. And then exclusive rights restricted free agents include Ethan Bonner and Obina Eze, who like no team can negotiate with. There's like no offer sheet there. It's like, we're going to tender you for this value. We're going to retain your rights to play. It's a pretty extensive list. Who am I interested in bringing back? Jack Jones. I think Rasul Douglas, he's played really well in his time here. I think you kind of have to lean into finding some more youth movements, right? I would not be mad if they brought Rasul Douglas back, but he wouldn't be particularly high on my pecking order just because of kind of where he's at in his individual career. I'm not interested in bringing back Liam Eichenberg. You're giving money away on that one because you could get a cap discount versus the cash that you paid him because he played the first 4 years here. So you gave him a vet benefit salary contract, and he's been on PUP the entire year. Just talk about Chris Greer flushing money down the toilet. Modestly interested in bringing back Daniel Brunskill. Would probably have to be a similar contract to what he's on now, which is a minimum salary vet 1-year contract. Jack Jones, I'm interested in bringing back. I'm interested in bringing back Kader Kohou for sure. Larry Borom, I'm interested in bringing back. I am not interested in bringing back Cole Strange, who is the player that Twitter was telling you Larry Borom was all summer, is actually Cole Strange. Willie Gay, I could take or leave, but that's more so just because they haven't found like that optimization role for him. Cedric Wilson, fine letting walk. Alexander Madison, fine letting walk. Darren Waller, fine letting walk. Ashton Davis, fine letting walk. Benito Jones, I would be fine letting walk. Kendall Lamb, he thought he was going to retire. He probably will not be back. Chose to come back, sign with Philly. Philly fell through. Now he's back in Miami. I think it would behoove you to continue to get younger there with the swing tackle spot. Now, if he wanted to be a veteran in the room and wanted to play again next year, I wouldn't be bad about having Kendall Lamb back, but he's not a priority for me. I'm interested in bringing back Julian Hill. I'm interested in bringing back Greg Dulcich. I'm interested in bringing back Jake Bailey and Joe Cardona. You could typically find a long snapper, so they go in a different direction there. Cardona's 30, will be age 34. Like, I'm not going to blink twice about it. Other than that, like, I'm not interested in another year of Ethan Bonner. It feels like this collective feels like they have something in Cam Good, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's restricted or tendered as a restricted free agent if this collective group is back for another year. But I could make a pretty short list of names that, like, I would prioritize bringing back. And it'd be Jack Jones, Kader Kohou, Larry Borom, Julian Hill, Greg Dulcich, Jake Bailey. How the times have changed. Jake Bailey's on the short list of bringing back guys. Joe Cardona. That's probably, if I had to boil down like hey, I really want these guys back, that would be my list. But Jack Jones is on it. And that's a credit to Jack Jones for kind of pinballing around the league like he did earlier in his career. And the way that he's conducted himself and the way that he's played and the way that he's kind of grown throughout the course of this season. Would certainly, most of these are probably 1-year guys, whether they're restricted free agents like Julian Hill or Kader Kohou won't approve it year after coming back from the injury. But you got some business to do, and I think it can get you closer to having a 53-man or 51 cutoff this offseason when it's all said and done. But you got 6 games left to play before you start having those conversations and extend some of these guys. And then you got to figure out who's the GM and who's calling the shots and what the budget looks like. It's a lot of ball game left. We're going to talk about a couple of the GM candidates the rest of the way here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every single day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action than right now. If you haven't tried it, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. Pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you can win, and it takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineups. They have a new stacks feature that's also a game changer. You can pick more on a single player like Steph Curry for points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. They also have an injury reboot that saves your lineup from loss if one of your players goes down with an injury in the game. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it is good to be right. If you're a Dolphins fan, you've probably experienced this. You drop more than $100 on parking at Hard Rock, battle traffic getting in, and then you sit in your car for an hour trying to leave when the game is over. What if I told you there was a better way? I found this new app that I think could help you out on game day. Dibs is a platform that connects you with verified homeowners and businesses near the stadium who rent out their driveways and lots on game day. We're talking about spots as low as $25. That's up to 80% cheaper than stadium parking, and you get in and out way faster. Every host is verified and rated, so you know exactly what you're getting. Dibs is available for games and events at Hard Rock Stadium and is expanding across Florida. Call Dibs on your spot today. Use code LOCKEDON20 for 20% off your first booking. All right, so let's get into Ray Agnew, the candidate from the Detroit Lions. He is currently serving as the assistant to general manager, a post in which he was named to on January 27th, 2021. In 2017, he was named the director of pro personnel for the Los Angeles Rams. This guy's done a little bit of everything. And we talked about Ray Agnew, I think, at the beginning of the week in passing. But I love the pedigree from a leadership experience that Ray Agnew brings to the table. He was drafted in the first round, 10th overall, out of NC State by the New England Patriots. He played there from 1990 to 1994. He would then spend time with the Giants, the Panthers, the Giants again, and the Rams. And he overlapped with Jeff Skanina with the Rams. So got a chance to talk to Z a little bit about Ray Agnew and had nothing but great things to say. But in his post-playing career, he gets added to the Rams front office. He spent 7 years as the director of player development and the team pastor for the Rams. According to his bio, he served as a spiritual mentor for players and assisted them with life issues. So you have people skills. So you've got the perspective of a player. He's lived the life of a first round pick. And he's lived the life of being cut or having his contract expire and moving to different places. And then he's put in a leadership position to work hands-on with players and have player development. I think player development and additional skills beyond I was a scout is really valuable for GM candidates. So he spends 7 years as the director of player development for the Rams. And then he gets put into his title as the director of pro scouting. He served in that role for the final 4 years of his 18 years with the Rams in both St. Louis and Los Angeles. So he's overlapping with Les Snead. He's overlapping with Sean McVay. He's overlapping with James Gladstone in the Rams front office. And as a title as the director of pro scouting with Los Angeles, he's evaluating all 32 NFL rosters in preparation for free agency and writing advanced scouting reports on upcoming opponents. So there's a in-season value to what Ray did with the Rams, and then there's an off-season free agency strategy value for what Ray did with the Rams. For the draft, he evaluated all players on the Rams draft board and prepared draft grades alongside team need analysis for the draft process. Throughout the year, Ray Agnew was also responsible with the Rams for the preparation of potential trade scenarios. This is all as the director of pro scouting. He's wearing a lot of hats under Les Snead after being in a player's role and then being in a player development leadership type of role. Right. And then he's working with Les Snead. And then he comes to Detroit with Brad Holmes, who is the executive vice president and general manager, Brad Holmes, coming over to the Rams. And they built this team from scratch. And that's what I love about the Ray Agnew body of work, if you will, as a GM candidate, is he works with the Rams and he sees one style of approach, right? And the Rams have obviously departed from the them picks strategy that they used when they built the roster up and tried to make the big splash and win all in and won the Super Bowl, right? And Ray was there for part of that, but he was not there for the breakthrough because he left for Detroit. He's, the flip-flop happened at the same time in which Stafford goes to the Rams and Goff goes to Detroit. And then in Detroit, they have hoarded draft capital. They have drafted in surplus. And they have been steadfast on player fit for their program. They are one of those teams that does not care about the general consensus. Oh, there was a draft in which they draft Sam Laporta top 40, and they draft Jack Campbell top 25 as a stack linebacker, and they draft Jahmyr Gibbs in the top 12. And then they draft a safety in the early second round as well, and Brian Branch. So there was a whole conglomerate of outside opinions that said, dude, this team drafted a running back, a tight end, a stack linebacker, and a slot safety with their top 50 picks. What a bunch of idiots. And every single one of those players has turned out to be sensational because they did not care about the perceived what you need to pick, and they were focused on who you needed to pick. And obviously Ray, with his experience in working with player relationships and player developments and being able to identify these are the kinds of people that fit within our program, I think that's a big piece for Miami. Like, you get veterans that come down and maybe they're not here for the right reasons. Or maybe you get a young guy and he's not ready to handle the rigors of the pressure of being the face of a draft class. And maybe he comes in and he's entitled and he doesn't work hard. Or maybe he comes in and doesn't apply himself the way that he needs to. Or maybe the pressure's too much. Or like, I think the things that plagued, just to use a single position example in draft picks for Miami, I think the things that were issues for Noah Igbenogany were very different than the issues that were problems for Cam Smith. Where Noah, it felt like it was a lot of pressure of being a first-round pick and how ready he was for that as a really young player when he first came into the league. Relative to Cam Smith, where I think the context clues are there, the fact that he was in Vic Fangio's doghouse and he was here for 5 minutes. And he didn't play that year, and they played Ethan Bonner over. And then Cam didn't make it to the end of his rookie contract as a second player. And the Dolphins had as big a need at corner as any team has had in the last 5 years, and he still couldn't even make the roster. So somebody that's got perspective and value in all of that, and then has lived in aggressive front offices with less need, and then also lived in methodical, we're going to build, and we're going to build the right way. And we're going to value who, not just what. I think those are the things that are the glowing endorsements for Ray Agnew. I'm going to summarize his resume relative to the criteria that I am grading these general manager candidates on, and then we're going to get to Ian Cunningham, currently the assistant GM of the Chicago Bears. That's next. Make sure you guys stick with us. NFL season is back, and there's nothing better than like being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout. It can be super frustrating. That's why you should use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. You could pull up Game Time on your phone in just a few taps. You could get amazing deals. Talk about your favorite NFL games for as low as $100. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. That's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Okay. Ray Agnew's resume measuring against candidates for the Dolphins. He checks a lot of boxes. He's got a player evaluation background from all of the responsibilities he had in player evaluation with the Rams. I did not give him credit for an administrative background, but he does have a leadership background that's not quantified in his grading here because of his role as player development and team chaplain. He does not have coaching experience, but he has extensive playing experience at the NFL level. So he technically is not even getting credit for two of the criteria that I'm using for like yes, no. And if you get yes, okay, then it's weighted, but you get value for saying yes. And if you know, you don't get any credit. He's been part of a successful quarterback plan with the acquisition of Jared Goff. He's a part of multiple successful programs between the building of the Detroit Lions and the building up of the Rams from when Sean McVay got there. He's got some head coach connections that are notable to me, most notably off of the McVay branch now. Going back to the time that they spent in Los Angeles together, Chris Shula, defensive coordinator for the Rams, is a really what I believe to be a very attractive candidate. There's also a couple of assistants in Detroit that I think would be valuable potential assets. Kelvin Shepard, the defensive coordinators, if not this year, next year, going to be really working himself up. And I like he's a little less stubborn with his scheme than what Aaron Glenn was in Detroit. And we're obviously seeing how Aaron Glenn's handling being stubborn with the New York media this year with the Jets. Strong draft record when you consider Detroit and all the drafting since he became the assistant general manager there. And when you listen to Ray Agnew talk, very down to earth, but very warming and welcoming and transparent with his thoughts. I don't think he's as technical. He's not the most technical interview, but he has had a number of interviews with Detroit talking about kind of the fits within the program. And it's a little less, he's certainly much less standoffish from a conversational standpoint than what the Chris Greer interviews have felt like in recent years for Miami. So I didn't think he was, of all of the people that I listened to on interviews, he didn't grade as the best interview, but he certainly graded as somebody that I thought was very likable and has good process and is very transparent. And I think has sterling experiences that would have him well served to serve in a leadership role as part of a collective. So that's Ray Agnew. Ian Cunningham with the Chicago Bears. You want to talk about kind of an impressive pipeline and pathway. So he was an undrafted offensive lineman in the 2008 draft out of Virginia. He was with the Chiefs, did not stick with the Chiefs, but ended up, after leaving Kansas City, very quickly transitioned into the Ravens front office as a personnel assistant. His education at Virginia is notable. Bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in education and human development. And I think these higher education exposures, and especially a bachelor's degree in psychology, like applying that to collecting information and parsing through information and how to go about making educated decisions and figuring out how to groom a staff to know what you're looking for because of his master's degree in education, right? Like, I think there's a lot of added value to his schooling background to go with a really extensive front office resume that's among the best of any candidate that we're going to have on this list. So Cunningham's young. He's right around 40 years old. He came out in the draft in 2008, didn't make the Chiefs, becomes a personnel assistant with the Ravens. He's there for 4 years in that role, and then becomes an area scout from 2013 to 2016 with Baltimore. He's a part of like the 2020 club, the 20-somethings that are working for $20K in the front office, and they're big-time grinders there in Baltimore under Ozzie Newsome. But you want to talk about connections. This guy was groomed by Ozzie Newsome. So what does he do? He leaves Baltimore after 2016, and where does he go? Philadelphia Eagles, working under Howie Roseman, 2017 and 2021, the director of college scouting, and then the assistant director of player personnel. 2021 gets a promotion to the director of player personnel in Philadelphia. So he works under Ozzie Newsome for 8 years, and then he works under Howie Roseman for 5. Roots, grassroots, leadership, admin, organizational, coordinating effort on a scouting rank. And you can talk about draft records, Baltimore and Philadelphia. And you don't want to give him too much credit for Baltimore because he's an area scout, right? Like, it's hard to quantify at all what that value you bring to that area is. But he's the director of college scouting, and then the assistant director of player personnel, and then the director of player personnel in Philadelphia under Howie Roseman. Like, knowing how Howie works, Howie's not the football guy with like his roots. He's always put really good football people in the front office to help him make good decisions. And Cunningham was one of those guys before he left in 2022 with Ryan Poles to become the assistant general manager in Chicago, a spot that he has held since 2022. And what the Bears have done this offseason, I look at the trade that they did with Carolina, how that worked out. I look at how they've invested in the offensive line. Cunningham himself is a former offensive lineman. Their interior offensive line overhaul this offseason, drafting Darnell Wright early in the draft. This is a very well-respected executive. He's interviewed for general manager position several times. He was a finalist for the Commanders job before they ultimately gave that position to Adam Peters. So he has been on the up and up, is still young. I think Chicago being in an upswing is only going to further help his candidacy. And I think his roots are really attractive. So Ian Cunningham, both he and Ray Agnew, neither one of them get a nod for that cherry on top. Do you know and understand South Florida and the Dolphins organization and the heritage of this team? Neither one of them get credit there. But Cunningham does have a player evaluation background. He's got an impressive education, despite not having formal administrative background or coaching experience. But he was a player who made it to the NFL for a brief stint. Was part of a quarterback draft with Caleb Williams, and they've successfully transitioned. And then during his time in he was not there in Baltimore when they drafted Lamar Jackson, but Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts was part of that draft as well. So he's been a part of drafting both Jalen Hurts and Caleb Williams, and Caleb was first overall, right? Part of multiple successful programs with stops in Baltimore and Philadelphia. The draft record is a yes. I've enjoyed listening to his YouTube interviews as well and hearing him speak about his philosophies. I would say probably John Eric Sullivan, who we talked about yesterday, is like my number one interview in that regard. Cunningham represents himself well, though. From a connections perspective, Baltimore and Philadelphia, that Baltimore coaching tree, Ozzie Newsome, John Harbaugh, Howie Roseman. I mean, that's not necessarily anybody that you're going to bring with you to a spot where you're the general manager, but those are the right kinds of formative connections that should give you confidence on who this individual is and is not. So that's Ian Cunningham. So we've now looked at and done a introduction to John Eric Sullivan, Ray Agnew, Josh Williams, Ian Cunningham. We have 9 other names, including Champ Kelly, who we obviously know a little bit more because he's here right now. And we've talked a little bit about what he does and doesn't do. But we're going to get into some additional names at the beginning of next week. We'll get into Glenn Cook, Chad Alexander, Alec Hallaby. We're going to get into Andy Weidel with Pittsburgh, a couple of names as well. So you have that to look forward to. Enjoy the bye week. We might get a bonus show this week. We'll see. Kyle Krabs, you can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you all again soon.